You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
On a warm June evening in 2020, 2 sisters set out to celebrate a birthday in a London park. They laughed, strung up fairy lights, and turned a clearing into their own little world. But by the next morning, they hadn't returned home, and what started as a simple missing persons case quickly spiraled into one of the most haunting investigations in recent memory. Each clue only deepened the mystery, revealing a chain of events darker and stranger than anyone could have imagined. If you love gripping, true account-style horror stories that keep you hooked until the very last second, subscribe to Soul Studios. Every week, we bring you chilling new tales where real life and nightmare collide. So turn down the lights, turn up the volume, and let the story take you. A man's sharp gasp slices through the early morning hush. In the pale dawn light of a London park, his flashlight trembles over a horrific scene. 2 figures lie tangled in the dew-covered grass, skin cold, eyes vacant. Tiny fairy lights they'd strung up for a celebration now blink eerily around the bodies, casting long shadows over trampled wildflowers. The man staggers back, choking on a sob as the realization hits. He has just found the missing women. Hours earlier, on a cool June night in 2020, 2 sisters wandered into that same clearing at Fryent Country Park, unaware of the evil lurking in the darkness. Bibaa Henry, 46, and her younger half-sister, Nicole Smallman, 27, were in high spirits. It was Bibaa's birthday, and pandemic restrictions had finally eased enough for a small outdoor gathering. They spread out a picnic blanket beneath the stars and hung fairy lights in the surrounding bushes, turning the clearing into a private little paradise. Laughter echoed in the gentle summer air as a few close friends joined them to celebrate. As midnight approached, the party wound down and friends drifted home. But Bibaa and Nicole weren't ready to end the night. The sisters danced together under the blinking lights. Music from a tiny speaker mingling with their giggles. In candid selfies snapped on Nicole's phone, they appeared joyful and carefree, faces glowing with happiness. Neither of them sensed that hidden among the trees, someone was watching and waiting. Unseen by the sisters, a shadowy figure crept closer through the brush. The moon was a sliver, offering little light as the figure edged toward the clearing. Bibaa and Nicole, lost in their fun, didn't notice the uneasy silence that had fallen over the woods, or the silhouette that now stood just beyond the tree line. In a heartbeat, that silence was shattered. A blur of motion. The sisters barely had time to scream. Nicole's cry was suddenly silenced as a searing pain tore through her. Bibaa lunged at the attacker, screaming her sister's name. In the chaos, the string of fairy lights was yanked from the branches and fell to the ground in a tangle of tiny glowing orbs. Nicole stumbled, blood soaking her dress, and collapsed onto the picnic blanket. Bibaa's cries of rage and terror echoed through the night as she fought the assailant with everything she had. She clawed at him in the darkness, tearing at his face or arms, anything to make him stop. But the attacker was frenzied and strong. Another thrust of the knife, then another. Bibaa collapsed beside her sister, the light in her eyes fading as the fairy lights blinked on. The figure stood over them, chest heaving. In the dim glow, his face was just a mask of darkness. A few heartbeats passed. Then the killer turned and melted back into the night, leaving the sisters bleeding in the silence of their once magical clearing. By the next morning, family and friends knew something was very wrong. Bibaa and Nicole hadn't returned home and were not answering their phones. Nicole's boyfriend and Bibaa's daughter grew panicked when they learned the sisters never left the park. Calls to the police went out, but the initial response was sluggish, treated like a routine missing persons case. So the loved ones took matters into their own hands. That morning, a small group of family and friends rushed to Fryent Country Park, hearts pounding with dread. They retraced the sisters' steps, scouring the fields and bushes. Nicole's boyfriend desperately called out her name into the quiet, dew-laden air. Suddenly he spotted something in the grass, a pair of glasses and a phone spattered with blood. His voice caught in his throat. With shaking hands, he followed a trail of disturbed foliage, and that's when he came upon the unspeakable. Two lifeless bodies lay hidden in the tall grass, illuminated by the faint glow of those scattered fairy lights. The screams that followed were so raw and anguished that nearby birds erupted from the treetops. The sisters had been found, and the sight was every loved one's worst nightmare. Police and forensic teams swarmed the park within hours. What had been a peaceful oasis only a night before was now an active crime scene marked by yellow tape and numbered evidence markers. Detectives observed that the attack was brutal and frenzied. The women had been stabbed multiple times. Yet robbery clearly wasn't the motive. Their belongings were mostly still there, aside from the missing knife that had likely been carried off by the killer. One detective crouched near a cluster of wildflowers, noticing something glinting on a leaf. It was a drop of blood, and not from either victim. Someone else had been bleeding, possibly injured during the struggle. Carefully collecting samples, the forensic team noted more clues. A trail of blood droplets leading away into the woods, a size 11 footprint pressed in the soft earth, and strands of dark fabric fiber that didn't match the victim's clothing. As technicians snapped photos, detectives pieced together a grim timeline. Judging by the scene, Bibaa had fought fiercely. Defensive wounds on her arms and the signs of struggle indicated she may have wounded the attacker. If the killer was injured and bleeding, that was a critical clue. He had left a piece of himself at the scene. Within days, the lab confirmed that the blood at the scene belonged to an unknown male. This profile didn't match anyone in the criminal DNA database, meaning the killer had no prior record on file. Investigators widened their net, checking hospital reports and canvassing for anyone who had a suspicious cut or wound after that night. Sure enough, a lead emerged. A nearby convenience store had captured CCTV footage in the early hours after the murders. The grainy video showed a young man hurriedly buying bandages and a stack of lottery tickets, a makeshift bandage already wrapped around his left hand. He appeared agitated, eyes darting around, and he paid in cash before slipping back into the darkness. That detail sent a chill down the detectives' spines. Lottery tickets? It seemed absurdly out of place. Why, after committing such a horrific crime, would the killer's next move be purchasing lottery tickets? The investigators kept digging, determined to unravel this odd clue. Eventually, a stroke of luck. The DNA sample from the scene produced a partial match to a family member in the system. Not an exact hit, but close enough to narrow down the suspect pool. It pointed to a family with the surname Hussein. Under scrutiny was an 18-year-old named Daniel Hussein, who lived not far from the park. He had no prior convictions, but records showed he'd been flagged in a de-radicalization program for obsession with occult forums and extremist content. This was enough for police to act. In the pre-dawn darkness on July 1st, 2020, armed officers quietly surrounded a modest house in North London. They moved in swiftly, and moments later led out a handcuffed young man, Daniel Hussein. Fresh cuts were visible on his hands, some of them still healing. As officers swept through the house, a search of Daniel's bedroom made the investigators' skin crawl. At first glance, it looked like any messy teenager's room. Video games and clothes strewn about, but then there were the knives. 2 large kitchen knives, still in their packaging, were discovered in a drawer. They were the same brand and size as the murder weapon, suggesting he had stocked up to kill again. And then, tucked away atop a bookshelf, an officer found a folded sheet of paper that would redefine the entire investigation. A handwritten note stained with reddish-brown spots. As a detective carefully opened it under a lamp, a few of the officers crowded in, eyes growing wide. Scrawled in shaky handwriting was a title, Agreement, and below it an opening line that made the blood drain from their faces. For the mighty King Lucifuge Rofocale. The investigators exchanged uneasy glances. Lucifuge Rofocale, the name rang a bell for one detective versed in occult lore. Heart pounding, he continued to read the letter aloud. He addressed the letter to this supposed demon king, promising to perform a minimum of 6 sacrifices every 6 months for as long as I am free and physically capable. In return for this bloodshed, the writer asked for one thing: to win the Mega Millions super jackpot. Essentially, to win a huge lottery prize and for protection against being caught. The contract was signed at the bottom in the author's name, Daniel Hussein, written not in ink but in what looked like his own blood. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the hum of the lamp. None of the hardened investigators could believe what they were seeing. Clutching the note with gloved fingers, the lead detective felt a chill crawl up his spine. Suddenly, the case's strangest pieces all clicked into place. The frenzied overkill of 2 strangers with no apparent motive, the suspect's bizarre detour to buy lottery tickets after the murders, the mention of needing 6 victims. This wasn't a random attack or personal vendetta at all. It was an attempted occult sacrifice. Daniel Hussein wasn't just a killer. In his mind, he was fulfilling his part of a terrifying bargain, trading human lives for supernatural favors. The detective's mind flashed back to the crime scene. 2 innocent women slain brutally for reasons no one could fathom at first. Now the reason was right here, scrawled in blood and ink, and it was more nightmarish than anyone had imagined. The trial that followed revealed just how deeply Daniel had sunk into the darkest corners of the web and his own delusions. Prosecutors laid out how he plotted the murders as the first step in his twisted contract. He showed no remorse, even as the evidence was overwhelming, including his DNA at the scene, CCTV footage, and that chilling pact. Psychiatrists evaluated him, trying to determine if he truly believed a demon would make him rich, or if it was a convenient excuse for his actions. In the end, the jury didn't buy any supernatural story. Daniel Hussein was found guilty on all counts. The judge, baffled and horrified, described the crime as a prolonged, frenzied attack driven by a bizarre and spine-chilling pact with dark forces. Hussein received a life sentence, ensuring he'll spend at least 35 years behind bars, never getting a chance to claim any jackpot he thought might await him. But even with the case closed, a lingering unease remained. It was the kind of story that made you double-check the locks at night and pray it truly was over. The letter Daniel wrote had demanded 6 sacrifices. He had managed only 2 before he was stopped. Was it sheer luck that police caught him early, or something else at work? Some officers later whispered about an eerie coincidence. On the day Daniel Hussein was finally apprehended, a lottery drawing halfway across the country produced an unexpected winner, as if someone, somewhere, got what he had wished for. It was likely nothing more than a bizarre twist of fate, but it was enough to make even the most hardened skeptics shudder. In the end, whether any infernal entity was really involved, or it was all just the delusion of a disturbed young man, one fact remains. 2 vibrant, loving sisters lost their lives to an unimaginably dark human deed. The ambiguous legacy of that night leaves us with a chilling thought. Real monsters don't always lurk in our nightmares or under the bed. Sometimes they hide in plain sight, driven by fanatic beliefs and cold-blooded desires we can scarcely imagine. And that terrifying reality is far harder to exorcise than any demon. Some stories leave you uneasy because they're unresolved. This one lingers because it is resolved, and the truth is far more disturbing than any ghost story. 2 sisters died not because of chance, but because someone believed he could trade their lives for luck and protection. Whether his so-called pact was just a delusion or something darker, the thought that a human being could follow through with it is what should keep you up at night. When murder is just the down payment on a deal with the devil, no one's truly safe.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.